The most powerful spell in Dungeons & Dragons is not what you think. Now, of course, we're not talking about Wish. That sort of magic can only be cast by a once-in-a-generation talent, beings so powerful that they enter into myth and history. As cool as Sun Wukong, Enkidu, and Merlin were, they don't necessarily affect the way people live their lives today. Today, I want to talk in depth about a third level spell called Sending. This is one of the most drastically world-defining spells ever published in Dungeons & Dragons, and as DMs, we need to be factoring it in to our world building. How? Let's talk. Sending is a third level evocation spell available to clerics, bards and wizards in their natural spell lists, and many more classes if you're willing to get creative. It takes an action to cast, uses verbal, somatic and material components, and allows you to communicate 25 words back and forth between you and a creature you are familiar with within 6 seconds. Any creature with at least 1 point in intelligence can receive this message and theoretically instantaneously reply to you. It even has a very high chance of functioning even across the entire planar landscape. But it's not more useful than Fireball, right? Well, here's the thing. Sending, much like Nistel's magic aura or guards and wards, is a spell most useful if someone else has gone through the effort to learn and prepare it and cast it on your behalf. In combat, it's usually more helpful for a 5th level wizard to cast a battlefield control spell rather than sending a glorified text message. And out of combat? Well, you've got to save spell slots for the next fight. Now, sending gets used, if remembered at all, at the end of the day, when your caster is confident that they need no more spell slots for that day. Or if you're a particular character from a certain actual play show, whenever there's somebody that needs a little bit of a reminder that you exist. Or fart noises. Or inexplicable singing. Or just checking in with your mother. But most of the people in your world aren't adventurers. They don't expect to get into a fight every other day. No. They've got businesses to run, kingdoms to administrate, wars to fight, or contacts to contact. In our own world, the development of a worldwide telegram network over the 19th century resulted in a complete alteration of international diplomacy, and the dominance of British undersea telegram networks massively aided in key world events, helping us win the First World War. Information is a resource that has always been incredibly valuable. Otherwise, the world's history wouldn't be filled with explorers, adventurers, diplomats, and message bearers. So, instant messages, readily available to reasonably trained wizards, multiple times a day? This changes everything about how we should see D&D worlds. Firstly, messages are limited to 25 words each way. This, of course, means that communicating dense or complex information may prove a challenge, as our dear Jester very often found out. However, sending has been around probably for as long as your world has had magic. This would almost certainly have led to the development of a shorthand. Much like teenagers in the early 2000s trying to keep under character limits, the development of acronyms and a sort of sending speak is inevitable. Sending etiquette would probably have developed into its own unique linguistic form, which helps in the maximalisation of this limited medium. Stock phrases will have been pared down to their least wordy forms. And it is entirely possible that a high-class education will involve learning sending etiquette, almost as if it's a foreign language. Sending etiquette would obviously be taught at almost every wizarding academy, most colleges of bardistry, and perhaps may even form part of certain clerical training programs as well. Furthermore, we must remember that hiring an individual to cast magic for you would likely be very, very expensive unless you're living in a very high magic world. Therefore, the ins and outs of sending etiquette would most likely be taught to some of the nobility of your world as well, just in case they ever need to send an urgent message or close a business deal immediately, without risking embarrassing themselves by not knowing the proper language. Heck, it might even be considered an insult in some circles or situations to actually receive a physical letter, as it implies that one is not important enough to have the money spent on an instantaneous sending. All this is to say, it may be worth considering that the nobility and people in great power in your world all have access to a shared communication system designed for maximal efficiency, with all of the trappings of polite society, formalised ways of speaking, complex and strange rules for addressing individuals, and various levels of politeness that can be engendered in a single word. This could even serve as a sort of secret language among nobles, allowing them to talk freely even when standing among the uneducated riffraff. Speaking of secrecy, the sending spell is the perfect tool for any spymaster, vizier, or court mage in your world. An untraceable, instantaneous message sent directly to the recipient with no chance of interception or bribing the messenger to take a quick peek. The trade in spell scrolls of sending would be unimaginable. Every embedded agent in the world would have some contact who can get them a sending spell, just in case anything of massive, immediate importance is spotted. For the most crucial, urgent or important messages, sending is a no-brainer in any D&D world. In my opinion, it would be foolish to try and run any court that actually sought any political power at all without access to the most important diplomatic tool in the world. You are always behind the trend on any critical international information, unless some friendly individual from another court decides it's best to clue you in. This is likely the origin of the magical advisor trope, which is incredibly common in D&D related material. Although the evil advisor may be a bit of a joke at this point, it is nonetheless true that if the king himself can't cast the sending spell, then he's at the mercy of his court mage. That's the thing about an untraceable message sent in pure secrecy between only two people. If you're not one of those two people, you're immediately out of the loop. So if you employ a spymaster or mage to take care of all this in and outward flowing information from your court, they hold all the cards. And if they're evil, they can lie and manipulate you based on the information that they have definitely received. Thus, as in much of fantasy literature, most courts would employ a court mage if they can afford it. And not only that, they would most likely fund the young mage's learning and scholarship throughout their entire life, in the hopes of gaining a loyal and willful executor of the monarch's wishes. Furthermore, at least as in my main campaign world, the ruling classes often pay for their firstborns to receive some magical training at wizarding schools, which requires only dedication to be good enough to cast some spells. This ensures that they can hopefully be privy to the great advantage of controlling their own court's information. If you're able to send out your own sending spells, it's going to be very difficult to lie to you about what exactly is going on. Finally, we turn to military use. Throughout our history, information has been critical in the outcomes of war. Even the marathon, an internationally known phenomenon, was born out of a necessity to send military information as quickly as possible long distance. While spells such as scrying can offer unparalleled opportunities to hear enemy generals planning in the heat before the battle, for organising one's own forces both before and during battle, there is no spell better than sending. The Battle of Bosworth Field, one of the most critical junctures in English history, was decided when a presumed ally turned tail and joined the enemy force. This defection could have been prevented had the king or one of his advisors around him been actually able to communicate with the lord in question in the midst of battle. But the main military use of sending would likely be in planning and coordinating and opening up more complex tactical options. An army operating with two separate units with nonetheless perfect communication between them regardless of distance is going to be more flexible and more effective in the moment than an army that is composed of one singular battle with a classic military chain of command, with the added bonus of their communications being far less susceptible to interception, as semaphore or trumpeting or simply shouting out orders can fail to be. Admirals would be able to coordinate fleets in real time without even exposing their own position. And in a large-scale war, a general might actually be able to exert their own strategic influence on multiple different battles happening in different areas of the territory, all at once. For this reason, I would imagine many militaries covet mid-level spellcasters, recruiting directly from bard colleges especially, in hopes of gaining a military and tactical advantage, using the spread and dissemination of information. Let's face it, you're going to be unlikely to get a wizard to leave their research and come out to the field of battle, but bards and clerics might be more commonly found there. One option for a command structure for a very wealthy army could indeed be a military strategic general with a bard to operate efficient sending spells out to the troops, and a cleric to make sure the bard's not lying. This is just one option, but generally with a command structure that allows for instantaneous communication, it's a no-brainer which side wins. Heck, the entire Second World War was a constant war for information, and any military that could not realistically afford a dedicated spellcaster in their ranks, well, they're even more likely to lose against a better equipped army. Realistically, casters are the militaristic equivalent of far superior firearms technology, but not for the reason you think. Throwing a 10th level wizard out onto the front line, casting sleet storms and fireballs galore, is arguably less useful than a 5th level bard back in the command tent. Information is simply that valuable in warfare. I hope this has allowed you to see the hidden power of sending, not necessarily as a spell for your player characters, but as a spell to be used and coordinated within your world. Of course, your player characters may use it, may generate an amazing amount of fun at the table from messing with the 25 character limit, and may find great use in being able to talk to their allies across the world. But really, the people who are using sending best are those who are embedded in the political, economic and military systems of your world. The people who need trade deals to happen like that. The people who need diplomatic communications to stop wars from even happening. Those people who are the ones not worried about conserving spell slots for a fist fight later on. They're the ones who make the best use of sending in your world. And that's where you're going to find the most interesting stories and applications thereof. Now, in low magic settings, people who can cast sending may be very few and far between. There may be an entire war among kingdoms about who gets to control a particular mage and have them as a political asset for the rest of their life. This is certainly an intriguing way of building your world, but you need to remember that sending is likely going to be even more powerful when it is used in a one-sided fight. If only 5 nations in your world have access to this power, well, hazard a guess as to which 5 nations are going to be ruling the roost when it comes to warfare. In high magic settings, such as my own current main campaign world, I think there's opportunity for sending to be commodified, for mass production of sending scrolls to be a goal of many, to democratise the practice. As I've said before, nobles would be schooled in proper sending etiquette, and each kingdom would have its own grand mage to help facilitate international communication. Indeed, in my world, they go a step further. An international consortium of wizards has posted up to set fixed prices for various magical feats, and they have decided to use sending as a bit of a loss leader in their business model, making sending available to as many people as possible for a fairly low price point, lower than it costs to train a wizard, certainly. But it serves to remind the populace that the International Wizarding Guild has magic for hire, and a lot of that magic costs a pretty penny. But when you need it, you really need it. That's the power of this spell. It can be a once-generational shifting moment in a military conquest. It could be something that every noble learns how to do at a very young age. But in both cases, it is an improbably powerful communication tool that changes the diplomacy, politics, and warfare of your world forever. If I can ask one thing, if you've made it this far, please consider subscribing. It really helps a lot. I'm trying to build this channel into a community that shares my passion for world building and game structures, and I hope you'll join me on the journey. If you have any further thoughts on how to use sending, please drop them in the comments. I love this sort of discussion. If you'd like more videos in this style, going in depth on how to world build with specific elements of D&D, let me know. I really enjoy researching and making them. If you're craving more discussion of world building in D&D, here's a video on how to incorporate psionics into your world. And here's a video that YouTube thinks you're going to like. Either way, with that said, I've been Tom, otherwise known as the Grungeon Master, and I will see you in the next video.